Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. We are super excited to tell you about our 3D virtual environment potential for student development. I am Karen Booker. I am the Dean of Students at Lord Fairfax Community College, and I was one member of the team that worked on this project. You'll hear from a few others in a few minutes. Lord Fairfax Community College is part of the Virginia Community College system. So we're one of 23 colleges that work in this system. And one of the mandates of the Virginia Community College system is that all students enrolled in a 2-year degree program or a certificate have to take a student development course. And our course is called SDV 100. Currently, SDV instructors try to cover 8 complex student learning outcomes in a short amount of time. And this makes it very difficult for them to go into depth on the topics they teach. We have to cover topics such as wellness, study skills, critical thinking, college resources, academic planning, and the list goes on and on. And because this course is required for all students to take at Lord Fairfax, we find that anytime something new is required of all of our students, it's tried to fit into the SDV program. So it really makes it very difficult for the instructors who teach the course to get everything in to this 1-credit class. Since it is a 1-credit class, the short time frame is not conducive to creating connections and relationships among the students and the faculty and staff who teach the course, which is really one of the goals. We know that if students are able to make connections with faculty and staff who work at the college, they're more likely to be retained. So that's a very important piece of the SDVN course. So one of the things that we decided to do to help create the ability for students to work outside of class was to look into creating a virtual environment for one of the topics that we had to cover in the SDV course. And one of the ones that flowed very naturally into this idea was the library assignment that the students are required to do. So as we got started, we established a leadership team that we did some research on the topic to determine what type of virtual environments were currently being used in classroom settings. We surveyed students, we talked to the instructors, we talked to the library resources person, and we tried to develop this idea behind what would a virtual environment for a library presentation look like. So what we learned through our research is that this really was an innovative idea to create an interactive 3D virtual learning environment that we could use in this presentation. And what we also found out was that this is part of the VCCS mission to provide new opportunities for access and student success. And part of our team, there were 4 members of the core team, and the team was really a diverse mix of people from the college faculty and staff, and that perspective helped us kind of mirror what we're teaching in the classroom. There were some of us that were very comfortable using 3D virtual environments and others of us that were not. So that brought a unique perspective to what we were doing. One of the criticisms of the college success course is that the information that students learn in that course does not translate to their long-term learning. We know that many of our students will learn new information by actually doing things and manipulating that information. So this virtual environment will allow students to actually learn how to use library resources by interacting with them. Therefore, we think learning will last longer for them and help them as they progress to 4-year colleges or to their next goal in life. So when they have to continue using library resources or continuing doing research, this will help them because they will have actually manipulated the environment and worked in it. So now I'm going to turn this over to Brandy Boies, who's going to tell you how we actually progressed through the project.
Thanks, Karen. Okay, let me make my way up here. Okay, I'm going to talk a little bit about our exploration of this process. what we did is we went ahead and selected several virtual environments that we wanted to explore. And during our exploration, we took three things into consideration: accessibility, customization, and then, of course, cost. Dealing with our students, as all of you know, they're quite diverse. As Karen was saying, some people have no problem exploring a virtual environment and can get it right away. Others would be much slower at it. So we needed to make sure that whatever we selected was easy to run on any computer. They could do it from home or sit down at a computer at the college without too many obstacles and installation, downloading, and things like that. The other was customization. We wanted to make sure that we could take this environment and customize it to our needs for the STV class. Then also, potentially other community colleges could also customize it in the future for their needs. So we didn't want it necessarily to be a canned product that we couldn't manipulate. And the most important was cost. We did receive some funding from a grant to start this, but we needed to take the long-term cost into effect and be able to sustain this product over time. So the environments that we decided to explore, first was Second Life, and the pros of that was, it was very well known. It was unlimited customization, which we determined was a pro and a con when it comes to students being able to customize things, and it's server hosted and supported. The cons were it's an ongoing cost with no way to offset that cost. And user engagement cannot be tracked or limited. So when we have the students going in and completing a assignment or, a little game tasks, there's no way to track that for the instructor to actually give a grade for. Avaya Live was the second one. It's the pros are server hosted and supported. Login is required, so you can track their usage. It's built with Unreal, which is an open source program, so it's easy to customize. So that was very appealing to us. The downside to Avaya Live was the ongoing cost. We received a quote from Avaya, which was $100 per month per concurrent user, with a minimum of 1-year subscription. And this would have been $1,200 per concurrent user, and which means those that have been signed in at the same time, and a minimum of 20. So it was about $24,000 per year, which we just flat out don't have. So, and 20, that number would not support what we need it to do. We require all of our incoming freshmen to take SDV 100, so we need a lot more concurrent users than that to sustain that. The third was OpenSim, sorry about that. It could run on our own servers. That was a pro. Logins were required, and it was customizable. However, the con was it would require our own server maintenance, and the environment itself just didn't look polished, and it was kind of quirky. We had a hard time exploring that and working our way through it. The fourth was Open Wonderland, and it was open source and customizable. The con was the users must download the product and install it on their own computers, and there was no opportunity for changing the environment. So as you can see, out of all 4 of these that we explored, there wasn't one great one that was a definite go-to that we wanted to utilize. So what we began to do next was we started to think outside the box and explore some other options, and we actually found ourselves in collaboration with with a team, a company. They're Wyvern Interactive, and Jonathan and Morgan are with us today to tell you more about that later. But they're a computer game design company. They're actually LFCC alumni, and they were George Mason University students at the time, and they're now graduated. And what we did is they were able to create a virtual environment from scratch and tailor it to our needs and desires, which are based off what our students and instructors want and what research indicates. And the CIF grant assisted us with the initial startup cost. And then LFCC, we cover the second half of the phase 2 of the project. We are in the piloting phase of this, so once we pilot it in our courses and work out any issues, we're going to work towards obtaining an ETF grant that will then allow us to host the environment on our own server. Until then, the virtual environment will remain self-contained. So we're very excited to have come with this partnership, and the company's been great to work with. So now I'm going to pass it on to Greg McDonald, LFCC librarian.
Hi, so I'm going to talk today about what we currently do with the library presentation and what kind of content we cover, and then the issues that kind of presents in its current iteration. So currently, the vast majority of our library presentations are to the SDV courses, and the vast majority of those are done face-to-face in a one-off 50-minute presentation where we have to include basically everything that you could possibly need to know about the library. The other option is we do have, for the virtual environment, in our asynchronous classes, there are video recordings of some of those face-to-face presentations, but they're very limited and don't get updated nearly as often as they should. As far as the content that we cover, it's kind of an introduction to research strategy. Basically, how do you formulate a search? How do you think about keywords and search terms and that kind of thing? How to use the online catalog, how to use the databases and do basic searching to actually find relevant and useful and current sources, and then a general blitz overview of basically everything else the library has to offer as far as resources and as far as services. Now, the issues with all of this, as was mentioned earlier, is that SDV is fairly limited in the amount of time that we have, and as you can imagine, a 50-minute presentation telling you basically all you need to know to become a researcher at the collegiate level is not the most ideal way to do it. It's not the most engaging necessarily. I know that in my personal presentations to students, sometimes they just hear library presentation and kind of zone out and don't pay attention. I do my best, but it doesn't always work. Because it's a one-off, it's not great for retention of that information for the students, because they just see it once. And real problem and reason they don't retain that is that we don't have on the campus a very good place where we can do this kind of instruction and have the students simultaneously all online having access to the library resources and playing around with it as we're giving the presentation. So they don't really get the hands-on experience that would help them retain that information. So as a result of this, when we came into this grant and to this project, I basically went through that presentation and went to our Wyvern representatives and said, this is what we do, this is the information that we want to cover, let's make that happen. So I will let Jonathan talk about how we actually did that.
Okay, so hi everybody. I am Jonathan Wine. I'm the founder and CEO of Wyvern Interactive LLC.
And I'm Morgan Frederick. I'm the Chief Operations Officer of Wyvern Interactive LLC.
I promise we are much more excited to be here than our facial expressions will let you know. So the first thing that really we wanted to talk about that kind of is a surprise to everybody when they hear what we are is why a game design studio. And the reason for that is because game design often has a stigma to it about, people who are very much not involved socially, very much, a lot of times it's going away slowly, but there's a big impression that people just, sit in a basement sometimes and that's all that they do. But game design actually at its core involves a lot of psychology and just a lot of detail that really can translate over well to an academic setting.
One of the things that's really cool about our team is that we incorporate a lot of different skill sets. Our skill sets include people from different degree programs. Actually, I'm a creative writer. I don't call myself a game designer. I'm a game theorist. And I've been working very closely with Greg, actually, on doing the research for this particular project. We also have marketers, we have graphic designers, we have writers, we have people from all over. We have psychology. We bring together skill sets from pretty much every skill set that you can think of. We have someone who could probably do it.
Is someone talking who's muted? We're not hearing anything.
I have been talking the entire time right now with my mute button on. I'm sorry. To give you an idea, though, of why game design is a good idea for this particular issue that LFCC was having, is that, as it says on the PowerPoint there, game designers actually thrive. Whoa, hello. Game designers thrive on making conceptual problems, like making students be able to pay attention at a library presentation. We bring that into a physical form. So I put the illustration of Mario there because, to give you an example of what we mean by that, we call those mechanics, as you'll see on the second point. Mechanics are what we call the verbs of design. So how does Mario get across the pit? He jumps. Jump is a verb. So in the case of LFCC, it was learn. It was, pay attention. It was stuff that we wanted to figure out a way to immerse the students in a way that they would not only learn, but they would enjoy doing it. And another reason why that's really good for a game design studio is that game design is a really tricky, manipulative little beast, because what it's actually doing is creating pattern recognition in players and in people who are interacting with the games. That pattern recognition causes your nerve synapses to fire off quicker. So because the nerve synapses are firing off so quickly, the students, our idea was taking this very basic idea of what game design is. We can create pattern recognition by having the students perform virtually in the environment in a fun and creative way what they would actually be doing physically at LFCC, to get them to remember it better, to enjoy it, and to be able to have them, as Greg said, do more than if they wanted to just 50 minutes, but they could do it until they were comfortable with it. So Morgan, without further ado, I will let you do this.
Okay, so meet Veil, the virtual environment for interactive learning. This is the environment that we created for LFCC. It's not completely to scale for what the library at LFCC looks like, but it's our representation of it. And if we move on, I can show you a little bit of what it does. So there are a lot of different things that Veil does, the LFCC version of Veil does. There are several activities that it does based on the presentation that Greg provided. As mentioned before, I worked very closely with him to figure out what activities they would want, as well as the other members of the team, to figure out what activities they would want. So there are activities like book sorting to figure out, or to teach the students the Library of Congress system, to teach the students how to use citations, or how to cite books correctly, to evaluate articles properly, whether they're primary, secondary, or tertiary sources, how to use the LFCC library website. So, which, if you're a freshman, can get pretty complicated. Even as a senior at Mason, it got pretty complicated. And then all of that accumulates in a comprehensive exam. So bringing together all of those activities into something that shows what exactly you've learned, which would then be basically the final exam for that portion of SDV. The LFCC specific veil also has the LFCC logo and color palette, and then the final version is also going to have a version of Greg, which will talk to you, it'll give you advice, hints, tips, basically the many things that any librarian would do.
So, the reason that she says the LFCC specific version is because when we were doing this, we realized that this idea of a virtual learning environment, we could adapt to do really just about anything that that anybody would want us to do to kind of create an activity or a physical representation of something that was to be accomplished in academia, be that for LFCC, be that for a biology class, be that whatever. So what we did with Veil was LFCC, we got a fantastic framework, and then we realized that we can now tailor this however they want, however other consumers want, whatever we want to do. The idea is that, for example, of LFCC, if they were to come to us and say, hey, so Greg wants us to include this other activity in the actual, in the veil for the library, we can sit down with the team, we can talk about, what exactly they want to accomplish with it, and then we can go back to Wyvern and we can talk with our game designers, with our artists and our programmers and say, okay, now how can we, and the catchphrase is to gamify, how can we gamify this? How can we make this thing that they want to accomplish a fun, interactive learning experience that will not only teach them, but will also keep them interested, keep them coming back, et cetera, et cetera. So as it says there, no two veils are alike. We can gamify activities, assignment, task, whatever we're given. And then, as Morgan said, there's a comprehensive exam at the end where teachers or instructors will be able to go in, once we're done setting up our servers for it, they will be able to actually go onto a website, fill out their own tests, enter a code for their own individual school, and then it will connect to the program, and their test, quizzes, or exams that they want their student to take at the end of their session in Veil will be right there. We'll print out a grade sheet. That grade sheet will be sent to the professor, and it will actually let you evaluate your student like they had just taken a comprehensive test. The other really great thing about doing it through this particular game design fashion is you don't actually have to download software. This is something that you can access through web browsers. And there's also no subscription fees with this. We're not going to charge a monthly fee, because it's not necessary, because once we created it tailored to what the user needs. So we have no need to charge for that because it's your Veil. You have that one-time fee, and then it's yours. If you ever want it updated, then of course we would talk about adapting it a little bit and what would go through that. But in the end, once you pay for the product, that's yours to keep. That's yours for life. You can do whatever you want with it. And then the other great thing that also helps with the marketing and also helps with the personalization is, like Morgan went into a little bit, creating a virtual environment allows us to tailor it to your school, your company, whatever, with your logos, your graphics, your color scheme and color palette. We can do a virtual soundtrack that, we could do music that's representative of your school, or we could just go to one of our composers, and ask them to do just whatever, you guys have in mind. And then, of course, like we're doing with Greg, an avatar to make your students be able to have a quote-unquote physical presence there, represented by whoever you want. It could be someone in your school, like Greg. It could be George Washington. It could be the Wicked Witch of the West, for all it matters. It's up to you guys. But the idea is that because this isn't a service where people have already created it and you're just accessing it, it's a service where each one is created for the user. It's created for your school, for your needs. So it's completely your product. So with that being said, I know it's talking about game design is there are a lot of different facets of that. So our email is actually right up here if anybody has questions for it after the presentation. I think this includes a question portion in the actual presentation itself, but we're going to be here for a little while afterward if people want to come ask us questions about, game design or something like that. And
we also have, we're also on social media, and you can find us on Facebook and on Twitter. And both our Facebook handle and our Twitter handle are located on the PowerPoint slide. So again, any questions, comments, concerns, just let us know.
Okay. So if that's it, if anybody has any questions, like I said, we're going to be hanging out here for a while. Thank you guys very much. And we will talk to y'all later.
If anyone has a question to ask of the LFCC group in terms of the SDV and the background of the grant, we're available to answer those as well.